When the ACC blows up, here's why the Big Ten and not the SEC are the best options for Florida State and Clemson. I'm going to tell you right here. Lockdown Big Ten starts now.
You are Locked On Big Ten, your daily podcast on the Big Ten Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Lockdown Big Ten. I'm Craig Sheeman, coming up on 40 years as a sports talk show host and play-by-play announcer. And I want to thank you for making us your first listen each and every day. Wherever you get your podcast and on YouTube, we are free. It's part of the Lockdown Podcast Network, your team every single day. And today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKDOWN for $20 off your first purchase. All right, so today, we're going to talk about Florida State and Clemson because they're in a lawsuit with the ACC. The Big Ten makes more sense for them than the SEC. So if you agree, plus the NCAA baseball regionals are going on. 3 Big Ten teams are in action today, and we'll have our Big Ten picks for those games at the end of the podcast. Look, it's a foregone conclusion that Florida State and Clemson will leave the ACC. Both schools are involved in lawsuits and counter lawsuits versus the ACC over their underwhelming grant of rights media deal. All ACC schools earn considerably less than the Big Ten, the SEC, and even the Big 12. The two big contentions are the extraordinary exit fees should the schools decide to leave the ACC, estimated at about $130 million per school, by the way. And the ACC claims that they still get the financial media rights for all home football games for the next 12 years for these schools, even after they leave. Schools think this is ridiculous. They think it's unreasonable. They think it's unconscionable. They think it's done in bad faith. And many feel the contract, while bad, though, is airtight. That's why we have a lawsuit. But many have drawn the conclusion that if the schools win the lawsuit, great. They can move on from the ACC. If they lose or settle the lawsuits, they still leave the ACC. It just comes down to how big of a check they're going to have to write to get out. But they're leaving. They're gone. When they do leave, by the way, you have schools in North Carolina. You have Virginia schools. They're also going to bolt for greener pastures down south. You have Miami. I mean, it's going to be a mess. So where will they all go? Well, and we spend a lot of time talking about Florida State and Clemson because they're the two marquee ones at the top of the ACC conference right now. We've discussed this at length here on Lockdown Big Ten. It is either the Big Ten or the SEC. That's it. The Big 12 is not an option for these schools because they don't make the same kind of money in the Big 12 as they do in the Big Ten or the SEC. So of the Big Ten and the SEC, the Big Ten and the SEC, which are the better options here for Florida State and Clemson? Which is the better fit? Geographically speaking, it would be the SEC, hands down. I mean, they're pretty close by. But geography is no longer a factor when designing conferences. I mean, look no further than the Big Ten and its coast-to-coast footprint. By the way, it is time for a new Big Ten commercial on the Big Ten Network with the flyover over the whole country. It's time to put the new schools in. I have an update on that, on whether they're going to do that or not. Everybody loves that commercial. Anyway, back to the topic at hand. The Big Ten may be the only option here for Florida State and Clemson. There is a school of thought that the SEC doesn't want them. Why would that be? Can you imagine that? Well, the SEC already has conference members in the state of Florida and South Carolina with the Gators and the Gamecocks. Florida and South Carolina may be the loudest objectors as they don't want anybody else in their conference in their own backyard. Recruiting and whatever other reason they want, fundraising, the whole deal. They don't want any more company in there. However, as Florida Athletic Director Scott Strickland said just this week, no school has veto power. Everything comes down to a 3/4 vote among all conference schools. It takes 75% to make changes in anything. Okay, duly noted. What about rivalry games? If Florida and Clemson end up going to the Big Ten, look, the Florida State game, Clemson versus South Carolina, the Big Ten presumably let those rivalries continue. No big deal there. So not a stumbling block. While the Big Ten is coast to coast, it would love to expand into the Deep South. Other than Southern California, the most southern schools in the Big Ten are Indiana and Maryland. So if Florida State and Clemson are a lock to join the Big Ten, what about North Carolina, by the way? That could get interesting. That they're the wild card in all of this as well, because I think both the Big Ten and the SEC would like to have North Carolina. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised to see a bidding war go on between the conferences and that school moving forward once they leave the ACC. The SEC would love to get a school in North Carolina. And the Big Ten, relatively speaking, still considers North Carolina part of the Deep South. North Carolina, while I think they would want to leave the ACC, also they seem to be letting Clemson and Florida State do all the heavy lifting legally. Maybe it's a money thing. Let them spend all their money on the lawsuit, and then we'll see what happens, and then we'll make our decision moving forward. But I had a thought that maybe the bidding could get so intense for a school like North Carolina between the Big Ten and the SEC that maybe the Big Ten and the SEC would even be willing to subsidize some of the Tar Heels' $130 million exit fee from the ACC. You know what? I can't believe I'm just coming up with this. Perhaps I'll explore that option a little further in a future podcast this summer on Locked On Big Ten. It's an interesting idea. I got all sorts of interesting ideas in here. We haven't even mentioned Miami much, except for at the top, and dare I say it again, Notre Dame. As I made the case in a prior podcast on Locked On Big Ten, you can go back and check it out, by the way, on our website, talkbig10number10.com. It's back there a few weeks ago. I made the case that the Fighting Irish, they're going to have to join a lucrative conference one way or the other. They're not going to be able to remain independent now that we have this $20 million a year revenue share plan that is going to happen starting in 2025. That's a done deal. That's a thing now. It's a big line item on the old budget. They're going to have to move. But it does make me wonder, as I always do with you, how big does the Big Ten get? When the ACC explodes, does that mean the Big Ten takes 2 teams, 6 teams, 8 teams? What's the number? And do they take an odd number or an even number? That's important. They take an odd number of teams, and you always want to kind of keep it even. That will leave a room open for Notre Dame. Again, it's going to have to happen, I think, at one point or another. So it's an inevitability here. In the meantime, the next important date coming up in all of this, in the Florida State lawsuit versus the ACC, is June 18th. So a little less than 3 weeks away. There'll be a hearing in Tallahassee. Now, it's a continuation of an April 22nd hearing between the two sides. Now, I don't want to get into legal weeds. I always try not to do that. I try to keep it simple here, but this is wrangling about jurisdiction, as the ACC is based in North Carolina. Florida State is in Florida. There are 2 suits, or there's a suit and a countersuit, different states, and both sides are basically arguing over home court advantage in this lawsuit. So we'll keep you posted. That's coming up on the 18th. I would be interested to hear any of your thoughts about my thoughts. You can hit me up. First of all, I ask all of you, if you like what you hear or see here on Locked On Big Ten, go ahead and subscribe. Be part of our Big Ten community. You can subscribe and follow Locked On Big Ten for free wherever you get your podcasts, and that way you'll get the latest episode of this podcast as soon as it becomes available each and every day. By the way, I've told you the audio version, if you're on audio only on Apple or whatever you listen to your podcasts on, that comes out at 4 a.m. Eastern every single day. The video portion comes out at 6 a.m. on YouTube, and you can watch or listen at your leisure for the rest of the day or on your way to work. It's ready to go. It is time, by the way, to update that old Big Ten commercial on the Big Ten Network that you all like, the flyover with all the school logos and all that, the cool music. What's the latest on that? There is something. And Michigan State gets another Friday night game. You Spartan fans, Friday night is the new Saturday, it seems like. By the way, speaking of Michigan State, has anybody checked on Tom Izzo? And we'll have the latest Big Ten news. All of that is coming up right here as we continue on Locked On Big Ten. Locked On Big Ten, your team every day. Game Time is cool. All right, Game Time is an app where you can get tickets to anything. If it has a ticket, you can get it on the Game Time app. And we've got a lot of stuff going on, like the NBA Finals right now All right. You want to go to the NBA Finals? Get your tickets on Game Time. Finals tickets are faster and easier. Prices on Game Time actually go down as you get closer to tip off. They got killer last minute deals, all in prices, views from your seat right there on your phone before you buy the ticket. Make sure it's not an obstructed view. And they got the lowest price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets. They also have last minute deals up to, you can save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater. Again, if it's got a ticket, you can get it on Game Time. Take the guesswork out of buying NBA Finals tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE, for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. I want to thank everybody for making Locked On Big Ten your first listen each and every day. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Especially you everydayers out there. Meanwhile, be sure to subscribe. We're, we started like a little less than a year ago. We were handed 1,200 subscribers, which we were glad to get. We're over 8,000 and now pushing toward 9,000. Go ahead and click. And that's all you need. Doesn't cost you anything. And we are rolling, and you can be part of our Big Ten community. Meanwhile, after you subscribe on YouTube, you can also share, follow, and like Locked On Big Ten, your team every day. And don't forget to go check out our website. It is talkbig1010.com. And go ahead and get yourself some merch there, and all of our podcasts are right there. All right, let's take a look at the baseball schedule for the NCAA regionals. We have 3 Big Ten teams that made it. First of all, out in the Stillwater Regional, Nebraska. Nebraska was the Big Ten tournament champion, and so they're in, and they will take on Florida at 2 o'clock today. If you're watching this early, these are all Eastern times today, Friday. If you're watching later over the weekend, they've already happened. But the Knoxville Regional, that has Indiana is there against Southern Miss. That is a 1 o'clock first pitch Eastern time. And in the Lexington Regional, Illinois, the Big Ten regular season champs, will take on Indiana State at 7 o'clock under the lights Friday night. Speaking of Friday night, we're going to tell you about Friday nights in just a minute. But first, I want to talk about Tom Izzo, basketball coach at Michigan State. I don't know if you guys have been keeping an eye on him lately. We're wondering if retirement could be around the corner. You know, he's old school, and he's been doing it a long time successfully. And there are a lot of changes in college athletics lately. And he really doesn't like the way things are going. Doesn't like the way the portal has been used by players and coaches. Doesn't like the way the NCAA, lawyers, agents, and coaches have done an injustice to the entire system of college athletics. Those are his words. Well, none of that is new. He said it before, and he's been pretty open about his feelings. But at an East Lansing event recently, he said there's going to be a ton of coaches leaving the profession in the very near future. Will he be one of them? I don't know. We've seen it already in football. Maybe Tom Izzo will say goodbye after this season. Maybe. Stay tuned. Maybe. Let's stay with Michigan State here. The Spartans seem to love Friday night football. Sparty opens up the season by hosting Florida Atlantic, and the game's been moved to Friday night. We told you about this last week. We were talking about Michigan State, and they were wanting to get that game moved from Saturday to Friday, but their athletic director said, well, it's kind of tough with these TV deals. Well, it turns out it's been moved to Friday night. So I think they were in favor of that, and they've been trying to move that game, and they like season openers on Friday. I think Michigan State has had a season opener on Friday night 12 of the last 14 years. I think maybe in around 2011 they didn't, and then the 2020 COVID year, that was crazy. But the new TV contract does not leave a whole lot of flexibility, so that's why it took a minute to get this done, but they're pretty happy about it. The game against Oregon on October 4th is also a Friday night game. That's a 9 p.m. Eastern. Gonna have to stay up late for that one on the East or in the Midwest. And their game against Purdue, it's a home game, November 22nd, Friday night at 8 o'clock Eastern. Again, this is all due to the new Friday night Fox TV package, which is heavily loaded. I think all but 2 games are Big Ten games on there. So going to be some Big Ten action on Friday nights. Hey, any fan of the Big Ten and the Big Ten Network, as presumably you are if you're watching this podcast, I am, of course. You've all seen that Maps Big Ten commercial promo where it's kind of a coast-to-coast animation, goes over each of the cities and campuses, and the logos all pop up across America with the great catchy tune. Anyway, we have 4 new teams. So, I mean, that commercial, I think they started that commercial years ago when Rutgers and Maryland were added, and it kind of showed the whole coast-to-coast thing. Well, we've asked on this podcast before, what do you think the new commercial will look like? We're presuming there is going to be one with the addition of the 4 new schools. Now, luckily, that promo already starts right over the Rose Bowl. So UCLA is covered. We just got to add USC and Oregon and Washington, and then we start going east, right? So what's the latest with that situation? As recently as this week, the Big Ten Vice President of Strategic Communications, Scott Markley, said he had no update on the matter. I mean, we're basically into June, July, season's in August. What's going on? And I presume you've seen the Big Ten Network. They go to all the campuses, all the camps in August. I would, a lot of people watch that stuff. And there's Big Ten Media Days coming up in July. They carry all that stuff on the Big Ten Network, kicking off the new season, and I would assume they'd have this new commercial ready to go by then. Nothing's been done as of yet. The league says there have been no new decisions on this, and they're still trying to figure out if it's even possible to continue the commercial. A lot of people like that commercial. People are going to be upset. Hey, speaking of watching TV, do you watch sports pundits talk in the daytime on FS1 or ESPN? Can get a little irritating with all the shouting, talking over everybody, and it gets kind of loud. Sometimes you just turn down the volume, but I got a better option for you. Locked On Sports Today. Make the switch. It's a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news. Streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app that we like to tell you about. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. If you are new, we like to close out our podcast in our final segment with a special segment that we keep the same each, depending on the day of the week. Monday, we do top 10 Big Ten observations from the weekend. Tuesdays are Tuesday tweets. We do power rankings on Wednesday. Thursday, we look ahead to live and classic programming on the Big Ten Network. And Friday, we do picks. Pigskin picks, basketball picks, baseball picks. We're going to show you the odds for the 3 Big Ten teams in action today. And we also have the overall odds, Vegas odds for teams winning it all, the College Baseball World Series. So all that is coming up. We'll do that in 1 minute right here on Locked On Big Ten. We'll see how your favorite team's going to do. Check it out. All right, let's do this. We are going to take a look at some of the odds going on with these baseball teams that are still alive in the Big Ten. I'm going to put it on screen if you're on audio only. I always try to do my best to describe this for you, but here are the odds. We'll start off with the money line. Thanks to our friends at FanDuel, by the way. We've got 3 Big Ten teams in action today. This is money line, straight up winners. Indiana at plus 124. The odds for Southern Miss winning against Indiana, minus 160. Florida is minus 140 against Nebraska, while the Huskers are plus 110. And Illinois is plus 130. Indiana State at minus 166. All these fairly even matches for all of this. Now, you may be wondering, what are the chances of any Big Ten team or any team in general winning the whole thing? The college, because after the regionals, we got the super regionals, and then the College World Series will take place. Well, we just took the top ones for the College World Series and then added in Big Ten teams. Big Ten baseball teams have not gotten a lot of respect all season long. I think Nebraska just cracked the top 25, and that's it. All right, so here we go. Here are the College World Series odds For winners to win it all, Texas A&M and Tennessee are the favorites at plus 600. We got Arkansas at plus 1,000, and then Kentucky coming in at plus 1,200. Those are your top four teams with the odds. I didn't put them all in. I just grabbed the top four here. And then I took the 3/4 Big Ten teams. I got the 3 Big Ten teams plus the future Big Ten team with Oregon. In fact, Oregon and Nebraska have the best odds of the Big Ten teams, but the odds aren't great. But hey, good value if it hits at plus 10,000 for each of them. Nebraska, of course, the Big Ten tournament champion. Indiana in there at plus 25,000, and Illinois, the regular season Big Ten champions. Not great odds, huh? Plus 40,000. All right. So those are your odds. We always do a pick 'em on Friday or show some odds or some futures or all that. And over the summertime, we always try to keep something interesting, kind of future prop bets or something in there to discuss on Friday's podcast. But I hope you like those as well. And if those are your favorite teams, good luck to you as the 3 Big Ten teams are going today as we speak, perhaps, depending on what time you watch this podcast. I always appreciate that. And a couple of things over the weekend. If you're sitting around, if it's too hot out, you're inside watching some of these games, or you got a few extra minutes, hit me up. You can hit me up on Twitter. And there it is, X at Talk Big 10 number 10. You also see the scroll on the bottom. That is talkbig10number10.com, our website where we have all of our podcasts. This one will go right up there as well in chronological order and by team or school. We did a middle segment there talking about Michigan State. This one will probably be filed under Michigan State, among other things. And then you can also find your favorite team merchandise there. Shirts, hats, pennants, the whole deal, coffee mugs, coffee warmers, things to hang on your wall, your dorm room, your office, your man cave. Put some Big Ten stuff up there. You can buy it right there on Talk Big 10. See it right on the bottom of the scroll here, talkbig10number10.com. Check it out. Check out another podcast as well for Locked On Big Ten. Catch a couple over the weekend. Get caught up. It's a lot of fun. And you can also catch our friends on Locked On Sports Today, here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every single league. So go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. Pretty cool. You got that? You got us here at Locked On Big Ten. As always, we always appreciate your time. We also appreciate it if you would tell your friends, family members, alum that you may know that we're out here every day for you guys talking Big Ten. Maybe you got a Big Ten friend or family member. They don't even know we exist yet. Word of mouth. Tell them, hey, I check out this podcast. It's pretty good. We like it. Locked On Big Ten. Always appreciate word of mouth. Have yourself a wonderful weekend. Stay cool out there. Getting some hot temperatures out there. And we'll be back on Monday swinging again with all the latest news around the Big Ten. For Locked On Big Ten, I'm Craig Sheeman. We'll talk to you next time.